Marcus Thompson stood in the hallway outside the courtroom, his calloused hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his tie for the third time in as many minutes. The 32-year old mechanic had never imagined he would find himself in this position, questioning everything he thought he knew about the woman he loved and the child he believed might not be his. His navy blue suit, purchased specifically for this occasion from a discount store, felt foreign on his body, so different from the oil-stained coveralls he wore 6 days a week at Thompson's Auto Repair, the small shop he had built from nothing over the past decade. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows across his weathered face, highlighting the sleepless nights that had led him to this moment. His best friend, Carlos, had warned him from the beginning. "Man, she's not right for you," Carlos had said repeatedly over beers after work. "She's always talking about money, always comparing what you have to what other people have. That's not love, brother. That's something else entirely." But Marcus had been too blinded by affection, too caught up in the whirlwind romance that had swept into his life like a summer storm, to listen to the warnings that now seemed so prescient. 30-year-old Jasmine Davis had entered his world 2 years ago when her luxury sedan broke down outside his shop, and from that first moment he had been captivated by her beauty, her confidence, and the way she seemed to see something in him that he barely saw in himself. She had been dressed in designer clothes, carrying a handbag that probably cost more than his monthly rent, and yet she had smiled at him with such warmth when he offered to fix her car that he felt like the richest man in the world. Their courtship had been intense and fast-paced, filled with passionate arguments and even more passionate reconciliations. Within 6 months, she had moved into his modest 2-bedroom apartment above the auto shop, bringing with her a collection of shoes that took up half his closet and expectations that seemed to grow with each passing week. The pregnancy announcement had come 8 months into their relationship, and Marcus had been overjoyed, immediately proposing marriage and promising to provide everything a family could need. But cracks had begun to show in their foundation almost immediately after their son, Marcus Jr., was born 14 months ago. Jasmine's demands for more expensive clothes, a bigger apartment, a newer car, and lifestyle upgrades became constant sources of tension. She would scroll through social media for hours, showing him pictures of what her friends had, what their husbands provided, making pointed comments about how hard she had worked to maintain her appearance and how she deserved to be compensated for choosing him over men with more money. The breaking point had come 3 months ago during an argument that started over something trivial, a delayed paycheck from a client that meant they would have to wait another week before Jasmine could buy the designer purse she wanted. In the heat of the moment, she had screamed something that shattered his world into a million pieces. "You know what, Marcus? Maybe you're not even his father. Maybe I should have picked someone else, someone who could actually take care of me properly." The words had hung in the air between them like poison gas, impossible to take back, impossible to ignore. Marcus had stared at her in shocked silence, watching as her face shifted from anger to something like regret, but not quite remorse. She had tried to backtrack immediately, claiming it was just something said in anger, meaningless words thrown out to hurt him in the moment. But the seed of doubt had been planted deep in his mind where it grew like a weed, choking out trust and security. He had spent the next several weeks watching her more carefully, noticing things he had missed before, or perhaps had chosen not to see. The way she was always on her phone, texting people she claimed were just friends. The expensive gifts that would occasionally appear, things she said she bought on sale, but that he suspected came from somewhere else. The nights she would go out with her girlfriends and come home smelling of cologne that wasn't his. Carlos had found him sitting in his office at the shop late one night, staring at photos of Marcus Jr. on his phone, tears streaming down his face. "I don't know what to do, man," Marcus had confessed. "Every time I look at him, I see myself, but then I wonder if I'm just seeing what I want to see. What if he's not mine? What if everything has been a lie?" Carlos had been the one to suggest the paternity test, to take control of the situation rather than letting doubt eat him alive from the inside. But Jasmine had refused. She had cried, screamed, accused him of being paranoid and insulting, claimed that his lack of trust was destroying their relationship more than anything she might have done. "How dare you question whether you're his father?" she had shouted. "I have given up everything for you. I could have been with men who had real money, real prospects. But I chose you because I thought you were different, thought you were a good man, and this is how you repay me." Her refusal to take a simple test had only deepened his suspicions, and after weeks of arguments that were destroying both of them, Marcus had made the decision to file a case in paternity court. Now, standing outside the courtroom, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had grown up in a working-class neighborhood where his father had taught him the value of hard work and honest labor. His dad, Marcus Sr., had been a mechanic too, and some of Marcus's earliest memories were of standing in his father's garage, learning how engines worked, understanding that a man's worth wasn't measured by his bank account, but by his character and his willingness to provide for his family through legitimate means. After his father passed away from a heart attack when Marcus was 20, too, he had used the small inheritance to open his own shop, working 8-hour days for years to build a reputation as an honest mechanic who charged fair prices and did quality work. The business had grown slowly but steadily, and while he would never be rich, he made a comfortable living that should have been enough for any reasonable person. He had always imagined that when he finally settled down with someone, it would be with a woman who valued the same things he did, someone who cared more about love and family than material possessions and social status. In the beginning, he had believed Jasmine was that woman. She had seemed so impressed by his work ethic, so supportive of his dreams to eventually expand the business, so excited about building a life together. But as time went on, her true priorities had become increasingly clear. Every conversation seemed to circle back to money in some way. What they didn't have, what she needed, what her friends had that she deserved too. She had stopped working her receptionist job 2 months into the pregnancy, claiming the stress was bad for the baby, and had never returned despite his gentle suggestions that an extra income might relieve some of the financial pressure. Instead, she had devoted herself to maintaining her appearance, spending hours at the gym, the salon, getting her nails done, procedures she claimed were necessary to keep herself attractive for him, but that he suspected were more about competing with her circle of friends. Marcus had never cared about those things. He had fallen in love with her smile, her laugh, the way she lit up when she was genuinely happy, not with her designer clothes or perfect manicure. But when he tried to tell her that, she would dismiss his words as naive or unsophisticated, suggesting that he didn't understand what it took for a woman to maintain herself in today's world. The child support calculations ran through his head constantly. If Marcus Jr. wasn't his biological son, he would be devastated, but at least he would know the truth. But if the boy was his, and he almost certainly was based on the resemblance everyone commented on, then Marcus would have to make some serious decisions about his relationship with Jasmine. The courtroom doors opened, and a bailiff called his name. Marcus took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and walked into the room where his future would be decided. The courtroom was smaller than he had expected, more intimate, with wood paneling and fluorescent lighting that gave everything a slightly surreal quality. Judge Patricia Williams sat behind the bench, a distinguished African-American woman in her mid-50s with a reputation for cutting through nonsense and getting to the truth. She had presided over thousands of paternity cases during her career and had heard every excuse, every explanation, every variation of the same basic human dramas. As Marcus took his seat at the petitioner's table, he saw Jasmine enter from the opposite side of the courtroom, and his heart clenched despite everything. She looked beautiful as always, wearing a conservative dress that somehow managed to be both appropriate for court and stylish, her hair pulled back in an elegant bun, her makeup subtle but perfect. She was carrying Marcus Jr. on her hip, and the 14-month-old boy squealed with delight when he saw Marcus, reaching out his chubby arms and calling "Dada, Dada." in the way that never failed to melt Marcus's heart. The resemblance was striking. Everyone said so, from the shape of his eyes to the dimple in his left cheek to the way he scrunched up his nose when he laughed. But Marcus had learned that resemblance meant nothing, that children could look like people they weren't related to, that his eyes might be playing tricks on him, showing him what his heart desperately wanted to see. Judge Williams called the court to order and reviewed the basic facts of the case. Mr. Thompson, you have petitioned this court to establish paternity for the minor child, Marcus Thompson, Jr., born on November 15th, 14 months ago. You and the child's mother, Ms. Jasmine Davis, have been in a relationship for approximately 2 years, and you currently live together. Is that correct? Marcus confirmed these facts, his voice steadier than he expected. The judge turned to Jasmine. Ms. Davis, you are here today to respond to these allegations and to participate in court-ordered DNA testing to establish paternity definitively. Do you understand the proceedings? Jasmine nodded, her expression a mixture of hurt and defiance. Yes, Your Honor, but I want to state for the record that I find this entire process deeply insulting and hurtful. Marcus is this child's father, and the fact that he's questioning it shows a complete lack of trust and respect for me and for our family. Judge Williams leaned back in her chair, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp with the wisdom of someone who had seen these dynamics play out countless times before. Ms. Davis, I understand your feelings, but this court's primary concern is the welfare of the child and establishing legal paternity beyond any doubt. Mr. Thompson has the legal right to request this determination, and refusing to cooperate only raises more questions. Now, Mr. Thompson, please tell the court why you have doubts about your paternity of this child. Marcus cleared his throat, acutely aware that every word he spoke was being recorded, would become part of an official record. Your Honor, I love that little boy more than anything in the world. From the moment he was born, I've been there for him, changing diapers, doing night feedings, everything a father should do. But my relationship with Ms. Davis has been troubled, and there have been things that have made me question whether I can trust her completely. He went on to describe the constant arguments about money, Jasmine's frequent complaints that he didn't provide enough for her lifestyle expectations, her comments comparing him unfavorably to other men who had more resources. 3 months ago, during an argument, she said something that I can't forget. She suggested that maybe I wasn't the father, that maybe she should have chosen someone else. When I asked her to take a paternity test to put my mind at ease, she refused absolutely, which only made my doubts stronger. I'm not here because I want to abandon my responsibilities. I'm here because I need to know the truth, whatever that truth might be. Jasmine's attorney, a sharp, dressed woman named Rebecca Morrison, immediately objected. Your Honor, what Ms. Davis said was clearly a statement made in the heat of an argument, words spoken in anger that she immediately regretted. We've all said things we don't mean when we're upset. That doesn't give Mr. Thompson the right to drag my client through this humiliating process. Judge Williams held up a hand. Counselor, I'll decide what's relevant and what gives anyone rights in my courtroom. Mr. Thompson's concerns are legitimate enough to warrant investigation. Ms. Davis, you'll have an opportunity to tell your side of the story. Please approach the stand. Jasmine handed Marcus Jr. to her mother, who had been sitting in the gallery, and walked to the witness stand with her head held high. Even now, Marcus couldn't help but admire her composure, the way she carried herself with confidence even in difficult circumstances. After being sworn in, Jasmine sat in the witness box and fixed Judge Williams with a direct gaze. Your Honor, I love Marcus with all my heart. He is the father of my child, and I have never been unfaithful to him. Yes, we have arguments about money, but what couple doesn't? I grew up poor, really poor, and I worked hard to build a better life for myself. I went to community college. I got a good job. I took care of myself. When I met Marcus, I thought I had found someone who shared my ambitions, who wanted to build something better. But instead, I found someone who was content to just stay where he was, running a small shop, making just enough to get by. Her voice took on an edge of frustration. I gave up my career to have his baby. I gave up my apartment, my independence, everything, to move into that cramped space above his shop where I can hear engine noise all day and smell motor oil constantly. I've sacrificed so much, and all I've asked in return is that he provide for his family at a level that shows he cares, that shows we matter to him. But every time I ask for something, anything, it's a fight. It's like pulling teeth to get him to invest in our quality of life," Judge Williams interrupted. "M.S. Davis, I appreciate your perspective on the relationship dynamics, but I need you to address the specific issue at hand. Did you or did you not tell Mr. Thompson that he might not be the father of your child?" Jasmine's composure cracked slightly. "I said something stupid in anger, Your Honor. We had been fighting for hours about money, and I just wanted to hurt him the way he was hurting me by refusing to provide basic necessities for his child. I said maybe he wasn't the father, but I didn't mean it literally. I meant that maybe someone else would appreciate being a father more than he seemed to." The judge's expression hardened. "M.S. Davis, you don't get to rewrite what you said after the fact. Either you told him he might not be the father, which is a factual statement about biology, or you told him someone else would be a better father, which is a value judgment about his parenting. Which was it?" Jasmine's attorney stood. "Your Honor, I don't think it's fair to parse my client's words so precisely when they were spoken during an emotional argument." Judge Williams fixed the attorney with a stern look. "Counselor, words matter, especially words about paternity. If M.S. Davis planted doubt in Mr. Thompson's mind about whether he's the biological father, then his request for testing is entirely justified. Please sit down." The judge turned her attention back to Jasmine, who now looked less composed, her perfect facade beginning to crack under the pressure of the proceedings. "M.S. Davis, I need you to be completely honest with this court. Have you been faithful to Mr. Thompson throughout your relationship, and specifically during the time when this child would have been conceived?" Jasmine's hands twisted in her lap, and for the first time since entering the courtroom, she looked uncomfortable. "Your Honor, I have been faithful in every way that matters. Marcus is the only man I've been intimate with since we started dating seriously." Judge Williams leaned forward. "What does seriously mean, M.S. Davis? Were there other men you were seeing casually when you and Mr. Thompson first got together?" The courtroom fell silent, except for the sound of the court reporter's fingers flying across the keys. Jasmine glanced at her attorney, then back at the judge. "When Marcus and I first met, we weren't exclusive right away. We dated for maybe 6 weeks before we had the conversation about being in a committed relationship. During those first weeks, I was still seeing another man occasionally, someone I had been dating before I met Marcus. But once Marcus and I became official, I ended that completely. I chose Marcus. Marcus felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. He had assumed they had been exclusive from their very first date, had never imagined that Jasmine had been seeing someone else during those early weeks. The timeline suddenly became critically important. They had become official in early February, and Marcus Jr. had been born in mid-November, which meant conception would have been around mid-February. The timeline was incredibly tight. Who was this other man? Judge Williams asked. Jasmine hesitated, clearly not wanting to answer, but understanding she had no choice. "His name is Derek Matthews. He's a financial advisor, someone I met through work. We had been seeing each other for about 4 months when I met Marcus. Derek was nice, successful, financially secure, everything I thought I wanted. But Marcus was different. He was genuine, hardworking, kind in a way that Derek never was, so I chose Marcus." Judge Williams made a note. "And when exactly did you end things with Mr. Matthews?" Another hesitation. "It was complicated. Derek didn't want to let go easily. He kept calling, texting, trying to convince me I was making a mistake. We met for coffee once in late February to have a final conversation, to give him closure. That was the last time I saw him." Marcus felt the room spinning around him as pieces of information he had never known fell into place like a jigsaw puzzle, revealing a picture he didn't want to see. Late February. the exact time when Marcus Jr. would have been conceived. A successful financial advisor, exactly the type of man Jasmine always seemed to wish he was. Did you have any physical contact with Mr. Matthews during this meeting in late February? Judge Williams asked, her tone making it clear she already suspected the answer. Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. It was just a goodbye, Your Honor. We had been together for months, and I felt like I owed him a proper ending. We met at a hotel lounge, had a drink, talked about our relationship. He was very upset, said I was throwing away a future with someone who could give me the life I deserved. I tried to explain that Marcus was a good man, that I loved him. Derek asked if he could give me one last kiss goodbye, and I let him. It was stupid, I know, but it felt like the kind thing to do, a way to let him down gently. Judge Williams's expression showed she had heard some version of this story 1,000 times before. Ms. Davis, did this goodbye involve more than a kiss? The tears spilled over now, running down Jasmine's carefully made-up face. I made a mistake, Your Honor. We went up to his hotel room. It was just one time, one moment of weakness. I felt guilty immediately afterward. I knew I had betrayed Marcus, even though we had only been official for a couple of weeks. I went home and promised myself I would never tell him because it would only hurt him and it didn't mean anything. It was goodbye to my old life, and then I moved forward completely committed to Marcus. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Marcus sat frozen in his chair, unable to process what he was hearing. His attorney placed a hand on his shoulder, but Marcus barely felt it. Everything he thought he knew about his relationship, about the foundation of his family, had just been revealed as a lie. He had been raising a child who might not be his, had been living with a woman who had cheated on him and hidden it for more than 2 years, had been working himself to exhaustion trying to provide for a family that might have been built on deception from the very beginning. Judge Williams called for order in the court, her voice cutting through the noise. Ms. Davis, let me make sure I understand the timeline correctly. You and Mr. Thompson became exclusive in early February. In late February, you had sexual contact with your ex-boyfriend, Mr. Matthews. You then continued your relationship with Mr. Thompson without disclosing this encounter. That correct. Jasmine nodded miserably, makeup now streaming down her face in dark rivulets. Yes, Your Honor, but please understand I chose Marcus. After that night, I never saw Derek again, never responded to his messages, completely cut him out of my life. Everything I've done since then has been for Marcus and our family. Marcus finally found his voice, standing despite his attorney's attempt to keep him seated. How could you? His voice was thick with emotion. How could you let me believe for 2 years that everything was fine, that we had built something real together? I've been breaking my back trying to give you and that baby everything you need, defending you to my friends who said you were using me, telling myself that you loved me even when you made me feel like I wasn't good enough, and all this time you've been hiding this. Marcus Jr. might not even be mine. Judge Williams gavelled for order. Mr. Thompson, please sit down. I understand your emotions, but we need to proceed in an orderly fashion. And Miss Davis, I need to ask you directly. Do you believe Mr. Matthews could be the father of your child? Jasmine shook her head vehemently. No, Your Honor. Marcus is the father. I know he is. The timing doesn't work out for Derek to be the father. My period had just ended when I was with Derek, so I couldn't have gotten pregnant then. When Marcus and I slept together a week later, that was definitely when I conceived. Plus, look at Marcus Jr. He's the spitting image of his father. Judge Williams pulled out a calendar. Ms. Davis, I hope you understand that what you think about timing and what medical science tells us about when conception occurred may be 2 very different things. Women can conceive at various points in their cycle, and there are documented cases of conception occurring even during menstruation. Without a DNA test, you can't possibly know with certainty who the father is. She turned to Marcus. Mr. Thompson, I'm ordering an immediate DNA test to establish paternity. This test will include you, the child, and Ms. Davis. Additionally, I want this Mr. Derek Matthews located and brought in for testing if the initial results are inconclusive or if they exclude you as the father. Is Mr. Matthews aware that he could potentially be the father of this child? Jasmine shook her head. No, Your Honor. Like I said, I cut off all contact with him. I don't even know where he is anymore. He moved to another city for work about a year ago. Judge Williams made several notes before addressing both parties again. Here's what troubles me about this case beyond the obvious paternity question. Ms. Davis, you entered a relationship with Mr. Thompson, had sexual contact with another man during the early stages of that relationship, and then hid this information for more than 2 years while allowing Mr. Thompson to believe he was the father of your child without any doubt. Even if the DNA test proves he is the biological father, you've deprived him of informed consent about his situation. He's been operating under false pretenses, believing he was the only possible father when in fact there was at least one other candidate. She continued, her tone growing sharper. Moreover, your constant complaints about his income and your comparisons to other men suggest a pattern of behavior that supports Mr. Thompson's concern that you may have been more interested in his resources than in him as a person. Can you address that? Jasmine's attorney started to object, but Jasmine waved her off. Your Honor, I know how this looks, I really do, but the truth is more complicated than it appears. Yes, I care about financial security. I care about it because I grew up without it. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over our heads. We wore second-hand clothes, ate generic food, went without basic things that other kids had. I promised myself that when I grew up, I would never live like that again, that my children would never have to wonder if we could afford groceries or if the electricity would be shut off. When I met Marcus, I saw someone with a business, someone who owned property, someone who I thought was on an upward trajectory. I thought we would build something together, that his business would grow, that we would achieve financial stability together. She paused, wiping her eyes with a tissue provided by her attorney. But Marcus seems content with just getting by. He could expand his business, hire more mechanics, open another location. He has regular customers and a good reputation, but he doesn't want to take those risks. He wants to stay small, stay comfortable, and that scares me because I've seen what happens when you don't plan for the future, when you don't push for more. My father was like that, content with his factory job, never striving for anything better, and when the factory closed, we lost everything. I don't want that life for my son. Is that really so wrong? Marcus stood again, unable to contain himself. You think I'm not planning for the future? I have a retirement account, I have savings, I have business insurance. Just because I'm not trying to become a millionaire doesn't mean I'm not responsible. Judge Williams allowed Marcus to continue, sensing he needed to express feelings that had been building for months. Everything I do for our family. I work 60 hours a week at that shop. I come home exhausted, covered in grease, my back aching, and instead of appreciation, I get complaints about why we can't afford a bigger apartment or why I won't buy you a luxury car. I've tried to explain that my business operates on thin margins, that most of my income goes back into maintaining equipment, buying parts, keeping the shop running, but you don't want to hear that. You just want more, always more, and nothing I do is ever enough. He turned to face Jasmine directly. And you know what the worst part is? I would have understood if you had told me the truth from the beginning. If you had said, Marcus, I made a mistake. I was with someone else around the time we got together. There's a chance the baby might not be yours. I would have been hurt, yeah. But at least I would have known. At least I would have had a choice about whether to stay, whether to raise another man's child. But you took that choice away from me. You let me fall in love with that little boy, let me believe with absolute certainty that he was mine, and now I have to face the possibility that everything I thought I knew was a lie. Jasmine was sobbing now, her composed exterior completely shattered. Marcus, please, I'm so sorry. I was scared. I was terrified that if I told you, you would leave me, and I couldn't bear that thought. By the time I realized I was pregnant, Derek was completely out of the picture, and you and I were so happy. It seemed better to just move forward, to build up life together. I convinced myself that the timing made it impossible for Derek to be the father, that there was no point in creating doubt and worry over nothing. Judge Williams interrupted. Ms. Davis, the problem with that logic is that you made a unilateral decision that affected Mr. Thompson's entire life. You decided for him that he should raise this child without knowing all the relevant facts. That's not love, that's manipulation, even if your motives were based in fear rather than malice. She turned to Marcus. Mr. Thompson, I want you to understand something important. Regardless of what the DNA test reveals, you have been this child's father in every meaningful way for 14 months. You've cared for him, provided for him, bonded with him. If the test shows you are not the biological father, you will still have legal options regarding custody and visitation if you choose to maintain a relationship with the child. The law recognizes that fatherhood is about more than just genetics. Marcus slumped back into his chair, the fight draining out of him. I don't know what I want anymore, Your Honor. A few hours ago I thought I knew. I thought I wanted the truth, wanted to know for certain whether I was his biological father. But now that we're here, now that I know Jasmine lied to me for years, I don't know what truth even means anymore. If he's mine biologically, then I have a son with a woman I can't trust. If he's not mine, then I've lost the child I love, and I've wasted 2 years of my life building a family on lies. Judge Williams's expression softened slightly. Mr. Thompson, I know this is incredibly painful, but you haven't wasted anything. The love you've given that child is real, regardless of genetics. The work you've put into trying to build a family is admirable, even if the foundation was less solid than you believed. What happens next depends on what the DNA test reveals and what choices you make in response to that information. But know this, you are not a fool for trusting someone you loved. Ms. Davis is responsible for her own decisions and deceptions, not you. She ordered a court recess while DNA samples were collected from Marcus, Jasmine, and Marcus Jr. The process was quick and painless, just a cheek swab for each of them, but the implications of those samples felt enormous, as if the entire future was contained in those small vials. Marcus retreated to the hallway, unable to be in the same room as Jasmine, while they waited for the lab technician to process the samples. His best friend Carlos had arrived during the recess, and he found Marcus standing by a window, staring out at the parking lot below. I heard what happened in there, Carlos said quietly. Man, I'm so sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. Marcus laughed bitterly. You tried to warn me, everyone tried to warn me, but I was so sure I knew better, so sure that love would be enough. What an idiot I was. Carlos shook his head. You're not an idiot. You're a good man who believed in someone. That's not a character flaw, Marcus. That's actually the best part of you. Don't let her take that away from you. They stood in silence for a moment before Carlos asked the question that Marcus had been avoiding. What are you going to do if he's not yours? Marcus closed his eyes. I don't know. I love that little boy, Carlos. When I see him smile, when he reaches for me, when he falls asleep on my chest, I feel complete in a way I've never felt before. The thought of not being his father, of not being able to tuck him in at night, or teach him about engines, or watch him grow up, it's killing me. Carlos put a hand on his friend's shoulder. And if he is yours, if the test comes back and proves you're the biological father, what then? Can you stay with a woman who lied to you for 2 years, who cheated on you and hid it? That was the question Marcus had been wrestling with since Jasmine's confession in the courtroom. I don't see how I can trust her again. Every time she goes out, I'll wonder where she really is. Every time we argue about money, I'll remember that she was comparing me to Derek and found me lacking. Every time I look at our son, I'll think about the fact that she was willing to let me raise another man's child without my knowledge. How do you come back from that? Before Carlos could answer, they were called back into the courtroom. Judge Williams had the DNA results in a sealed envelope on her desk. The speed with which they had been processed was startling but efficient. The court had a lab technician on site specifically for paternity cases, able to process standard DNA tests in under an hour using rapid testing technology. Marcus returned to his seat, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Jasmine sat across the aisle, holding Marcus Jr., who had fallen asleep against her shoulder, blissfully unaware that his entire identity hung in the balance. Judge Williams looked at both parties seriously before speaking. Before I open these results, I want to address both of you about what happens next, regardless of what this envelope contains. Ms. Davis, if Mr. Thompson is not the biological father, you will need to locate Mr. Matthews immediately so we can establish paternity and arrange for appropriate child support. You will also need to consider whether you want to inform Mr. Matthews that he has a child, as he has the legal right to pursue custody and visitation. Mr. Thompson, if you are not the biological father, you may still petition for visitation rights based on your established relationship with the child, but you would have no legal obligation to provide financial support. She turned to Marcus. And if you are the biological father, Mr. Thompson, then you and Ms. Davis will need to make some serious decisions about your relationship and how you want to co-parent this child. The court can order child support and establish custody arrangements, but it cannot repair the trust that has been broken between you. That work will be up to both of you, possibly with the help of professional counseling. Judge Williams carefully opened the envelope and reviewed the contents. Her expression remained neutral, giving no indication of what the results showed. The silence in the courtroom stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Judge Williams looked up and addressed the court. In the matter of establishing paternity for the minor child Marcus Thompson, Jr., the DNA test results are conclusive. Mr. Marcus Thompson, according to these test results, you are the biological father of this child with a probability of paternity of 99.99%. There is no doubt that this is your son. The relief that flooded through Marcus was overwhelming, followed immediately by a wave of conflicting emotions. He was the father. Marcus Jr. was his son, his biological child. But he was also now permanently tied to a woman who had betrayed him, lied to him, and might never have told him the truth if he hadn't forced the issue. Jasmine let out a sob of relief, clutching Marcus Jr. tighter. "I told you," she said through her tears. "I told you he was yours. I knew it all along." Judge Williams fixed her with a stern look. "Ms. Davis, the fact that you were correct about paternity does not excuse your deception about your encounter with Mr. Matthews. Mr. Thompson had every right to question paternity given what you told him, and your refusal to test initially only made matters worse. You need to understand the gravity of what you did. You allowed this man to operate under false pretenses for more than 2 years. You deprived him of full knowledge about his situation and robbed him of the ability to make informed decisions about his life and his relationship." The judge turned to Marcus. "Mr. Thompson, you are this child's legal father with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. What you do with your relationship with Ms. Davis is up to you, but this court will ensure that appropriate child support and custody arrangements are established. Given the level of conflict between you, I'm ordering both of you to attend co-parenting classes and individual counseling before we finalize any custody agreement. In the meantime, I'm establishing a temporary custody arrangement that gives you both equal time with the child." She paused, looking between them. "I've been doing this job for a long time, and I've seen hundreds of couples stand where you're standing right now. Some of them manage to work through the betrayal and build something new together. Others realize that the foundation was too damaged to repair, and they need to separate and co-parent from a distance. But here's what I know for certain. That little boy deserves better than to grow up in a home filled with resentment and mistrust. So you both need to decide what you're willing to do to either rebuild trust or to separate amicably for the sake of your child." As the court proceedings concluded and the formal orders were entered into the record, Marcus found himself in the hallway once again, this time watching Jasmine pack up Marcus Jr.'s diaper bag while carefully avoiding his gaze. The little boy had woken up and was looking around with curious eyes, still too young to understand the drama that had just unfolded around him. Marcus approached them slowly, and Marcus Jr. immediately reached for him with a delighted squeal. "Dada!" Marcus took his son into his arms, breathing in that unique baby smell that always made everything else fade into the background. In this moment, holding his son, knowing with certainty that they shared blood and DNA, that this child was truly part of him, Marcus felt a love so powerful it almost hurt. Whatever happened with Jasmine, whatever decisions he made about their relationship, this child would always be his son. Jasmine finally met his eyes, her own red and swollen from crying. Marcus, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I hurt you in ways that might be impossible to repair, but please know that I never meant for any of this to happen. I made terrible choices, choices I've regretted every day even if I was too afraid to admit them. When I met you, I was so used to dating men who had money but no soul. Derek was successful, but he was cold, calculating. He saw me as an accessory to his lifestyle, someone to look good at business dinners. You were different. You actually cared about who I was as a person. You listened when I talked. You remembered little things I mentioned. You made me laugh in a way no one else ever had. She adjusted Marcus Jr.'s jacket while he squirmed in Marcus's arms. I fell in love with you quickly, faster than I expected. And that scared me because I had always told myself I would marry someone financially secure, that I wouldn't repeat my mother's mistakes. So part of me kept one foot out the door, kept Derek as a backup option, just in case things didn't work out with you. That night in the hotel, it wasn't about Derek. It was about me being terrified of fully committing to you because you didn't fit the image I had built in my head of what my life should look like. It was about me being a coward. Marcus listened without interrupting, his emotions too complex to sort through in the moment. When I found out I was pregnant, Jasmine continued, I did the math 100 times. I looked at calendars, counted days, tried to figure out the exact conception date, and everything I calculated told me you had to be the father. But I knew there was that tiny possibility, that small window where it could have been Derek, and I was too scared to face that possibility, too scared to lose you. So I convinced myself it was impossible, and moved forward as if it had never happened. Marcus finally spoke, his voice hoarse with emotion. The thing is, Jasmine, I would have stood by you even if you had told me the truth. Yeah, it would have been hard, and we would have needed to do a paternity test, but I loved you enough that I would have stayed while we figured it out. I'm not the kind of man who abandons someone I care about when things get difficult. But by hiding it, by lying for 2 years, you made me question everything. Not just whether I was his biological father, but whether you ever really loved me at all, or if I was just convenient, just the best option available at the time. He looked down at Marcus Jr., who was playing with the zipper on his jacket, completely content. And the comments about money, the constant complaints that I don't provide enough, those hurt even more now because I understand what they really meant. You were comparing me to Derek the whole time, weren't you? Every time you showed me pictures of what your friends had, every time you talked about needing a bigger place or a nicer car, you were really saying that you wish you had chosen him instead of me. Jasmine shook her head vehemently. No, that's not fair. I chose you, Marcus. I chose you over Derek, over the money, over the lifestyle I thought I wanted, and I've never regretted that choice, not for a single day. The things I've said about money, those weren't about wanting to be with someone else. They were about wanting. Man, I chose to reach his full potential. You're so talented, so skilled at what you do. Your customers love you because you're honest and fair. You could build an empire if you wanted to, but you hold yourself back. You're afraid to take risks, afraid to expand, afraid to want more, and that frustrates me because I see what you could be, what we could have together if you just believed in yourself the way I believe in you. Marcus laughed bitterly. You don't believe in me, Jasmine. If you believed in me, you'd be happy with the life we have now. You'd appreciate that I've built a successful business from nothing, that I provide a stable income, that I come home to you every night. But instead, you make me feel like a failure because I'm not rich, like nothing I do is good enough. The conversation was interrupted by Marcus Jr. getting fussy, ready for his afternoon nap. Jasmine glanced at her watch. It's his nap time. I should take him home. But then she paused, uncertainty crossing her face. Or I guess I should ask you what you want to do. The judge said we have equal custody now. Marcus looked at his son, then at Jasmine, trying to sort through the chaos of emotions swirling inside him. Take him home, give him his nap. We have a lot of things to figure out, but today has been hard enough on everyone. We can start working out a schedule tomorrow. He handed Marcus Jr. back to Jasmine, kissing the top of his son's head. I love you, buddy. I'll see you soon." As Jasmine walked away with their son, Marcus's attorney approached him with paperwork that needed to be signed, official documents establishing his paternity and outlining the temporary custody arrangement. Carlos waited nearby, ready to drive Marcus home when he was ready. "What are you thinking?" Carlos asked as they finally left the courthouse and walked to the parking lot. Marcus took a deep breath of fresh air, grateful to be out of the stifling courtroom. "I'm thinking that I need time to process everything that happened today. I'm thinking that I love my son more than anything in the world, and I'm grateful he's really mine. And I'm thinking that Jasmine and I have a lot of work to do if we're going to make any kind of relationship work, whether that's romantic or just as co-parents." Over the next several weeks, Marcus threw himself into therapy, both individual sessions and the co-parenting classes ordered by the judge. The individual therapy was particularly helpful, giving him a space to work through his feelings of betrayal, anger, and confusion without judgment. His therapist, Dr. Richardson, was a patient man in his 60s who specialized in relationship trauma. "The question you need to answer, doctor," Richardson said during one session, "is not whether you can forgive Jasmine for what she did. The question is whether you can rebuild trust with her, and whether you even want to try. Forgiveness is about letting go of anger for your own peace of mind. Trust is about whether you believe someone will make better choices in the future. Those are two very different things." Marcus had never thought about it that way before. "I think I can forgive her eventually," he said slowly. "I understand that she was scared, that she made bad choices out of fear rather than malice. But trust, I don't know if I can get there. Every time she's late coming home, every time her phone buzzes with a text, every time she talks about needing something we can't afford, I'm going to wonder if there's something else she's not telling me." The co-parenting classes were awkward at first, sitting in a room with other couples who were navigating separation and divorce, learning communication techniques and strategies for putting their child's needs first. But something shifted in those classes as Marcus and Jasmine were forced to work together on exercises and play different scenarios. He began to see that despite everything, they both genuinely loved their son and wanted what was best for him. Jasmine was also in individual therapy, and Marcus could see changes in her during their interactions. She was less defensive, more willing to take responsibility for her actions, more open about her fears and insecurities. During one of their custody exchanges 3 months after the court case, she asked if they could talk. They sat on a bench in the park while Marcus Jr. played on the swings under Carlos's supervision. "I've been doing a lot of work with my therapist." Jasmine began, trying to understand why I acted the way I did, why I've always been so obsessed with money and status, and I've realized that it goes deeper than just growing up poor. My dad left when I was 8, left us with nothing, and my mom struggled for years. I internalized this message that men can't be relied on, that the only security comes from money. So even though I loved you, I couldn't fully trust that you wouldn't leave like my dad did, or that your business wouldn't fail like my dad's schemes always did. I was always keeping an escape route open, always planning for worst case scenario. Marcus listened, understanding her better than he ever had before. "I get that fear shaped your choices, Jasmine, but at some point you have to decide whether you're going to let that fear control you forever or whether you're going to take a chance on building something real with someone. The question is, if we tried again, if we really tried to make this work, could you be happy with what I can realistically provide? Not what I might be able to provide someday if everything goes perfectly, but what I have now." Jasmine was quiet for a long moment, watching their son laugh as Carlos pushed him on the swing. "I've been thinking about that a lot, and I think the answer is yes, but I need to be honest that it will take work on my part to change my mindset, to stop comparing our life to everyone else's. I've actually been looking into going back to school, maybe getting my degree in business management. Not because I don't think you provide enough, but because I need my own sense of purpose and accomplishment. I think a lot of my resentment came from giving up my career and feeling dependent on you in a way that scared me." By the end of that conversation, they hadn't magically solved all their problems, but they had taken the first real steps toward building something new, something based on honesty rather than illusions. They agreed to continue with separate households for now, to keep working on themselves individually while also working on their co-parenting relationship, and to see where things led naturally without pressure or expectations. A year later, Marcus and Jasmine still weren't back together romantically, but they had developed a respectful and functional co-parenting relationship centered entirely around Marcus Jr.'s well-being. Marcus had even started dating someone new, a teacher named Angela who appreciated his work ethic and never made him feel inadequate about his income. Jasmine had finished her degree and secured a good job that gave her the financial independence she needed. And Marcus Jr., now 2.5 years old, thrived in the love of two parents who had learned, through painful experience, that truth and trust were the only foundations worth building a family on, and that sometimes the greatest love was not in staying together no matter what, but in being honest enough to acknowledge when rebuilding together wasn't possible, yet committed enough to still put their child first above all else.